So there's so much talk about and buzz about community. I thought we'd just start with your definition of community. What do we mean when we say community?
Well, it means different things to different people or different companies, but I told you before that we did this big study with Deloitte about how companies are leveraging communities as part of their business processes. And at first we'd called it something like the community effectiveness study or something. And about halfway through we changed the name of the study to the Tribalization of business study. Because what we found is that, what social media enables people to do is to reconnect with tribes, with like-minded people, not all the same people, there's always a need for people that are complementary, not necessarily, the same, but it allows people, like-minded people to regroup with one another, share, have a shared passion or shared sense of purpose, and talk with one another and get the information about what to do from one another instead of from the companies. Mm-hmm. And so, that's what communities are, I think, are groups of people that rally together around a set of, a shared passion, or the other thing that we found that is really very, very powerful is people want to talk to people and people want to help other people,
right,
which is really important. Yeah. So, if there's that sense of community where they can help somebody else and feel good about it,
yeah,
that is, it's kind of a loose definition of community, yeah, but that's what I would consider communities, is tribes of people that are sharing a common interest.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing I wanted to ask is, in my experience, when I'm dealing with businesses, fundamental questions come up of how do I align the idea of community with my traditional business goals of either innovation or harnessing
customer
people's
support,
intelligence, get customer support. How are you seeing the ROI equation show up with communities now as they're getting more mature?
So a couple of things. Before answering your question, I think that it's important to say that, and a lot of people make that mistake, is it's important to realize that when you build a community, the first thing you have to think about is not how it aligns to your process, but what is it that you can create that will get people to rally around one another, mm-hmm, right? So think about what's the value of that community for your customers or for whatever constituency you want to address, right? Maybe it's your employees. And that's the first thing you need to think about. Only afterwards can you start thinking about, how does this align with my business process, right? The other thing that you should think about is that when the most successful communities that we have seen tap into people's not their market framework, it taps into people's social framework of evaluating things instead of their market framework.
Right.
And so let me explain that in a minute. It's a social framework is if your neighbor asks you to come and help him and to move a couch or something, you're going to do it right away. It feels warm and fuzzy. You're not expecting your neighbor to come right back and move yours in return. A market framework is if I'm negotiating a contract with O'Reilly and we're deciding who owns the IP, how much you're going to pay me, how much, that's a market framework. It's cold, it's calculated, it has boundaries, right?
Yeah. So
the most successful communities, even in business environments, are those where you tap into people's social framework. Now, what we found is that increasingly communities are being aligned with business processes in companies, right? Mm-hmm. So they're started off as a customer support community, or they started off as a new product innovation community, or they started off as a thought leadership community to influence a category, mm-hmm, or something like that. So we're increasingly finding them aligned with business processes, and we're increasingly finding a lot of companies who are actually deriving ROIs from it. Mm-hmm. Although I think that a lot of them are measuring the way that the community is succeeding the wrong way. It's kind of an early market.
Yeah.
So I give you another example. We were talking to another big retailer, and if their community would be successful, people would communicate with one another through SMS and email, right? So not have to come to the site,
mm-hmm,
and yet they were measuring success of that community by page views and time spent on the site.
Right, which is a very traditional metric that doesn't really, yeah.
And so I said, why do you measure it that way? And they said, well, how should we measure it? And I said, how about by increased sales in your stores? And the CMO went, that's interesting. We measure every single other marketing program that way. I wonder why we never thought about doing this with this one.
Right.
You know, so it's an early market. People are confused. So,
Yeah.
you know, in some cases, you know, ROI is a dangerous thing, right? I mean, if you, in traditional marketing programs, if you measure something and you measure the wrong thing, that's it.
Right.
But if you start off a community and you goal your people by the wrong measurements, they may create behavior that is not in the best interest of your community.
Yeah.
So at one company, SAP actually, very large developer community, 1.4 million people or something like that. Mark Yolton, who spoke at a couple of conferences and participated in a study, said that, you know, he knows every metric that there is to know about his community, right? But yet, one of the metrics that helped him the most was stories.
Yes.
You know, hey, do you know this customer actually came here, did that,
Yeah.
and then became a big buyer of this?
Yeah, that's really powerful.
He says, you know, when you have stories going around, they go around and around for 6 months in a company, you can't stop them.